Okay, good evening. Welcome to the very first Bella Vista Council work session for a new year. Glad you're here. It's going to be a cold evening and a very interesting morning weather-wise. So the first order of business that we're going to talk about on Monday is appointing a mayor pro tem. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's actually an assistant mayor, so that if I become incapacitated or I'm away on vacation or whatnot, then the pro tem steps in. The pro tem, if you approve another piece of legislation tonight, as we have done in the past, will also have signature authority on checks. So the way it's going to work is you can nominate yourself, you can nominate someone else. There's no need for a second. When nominations are closed, then we'll have a vote, and the vote is not yes or no, it's by name. And we'll just keep whittling down until we finally find someone. For the past 5 years, it's been John. And Councilor, anything to add at all?
If you just have one nominee, then we won't have a vote. Then the nominations will close and they'll just be deemed elected because there's only one candidate. But if you do have more than one nominee, then you just vote by name, and then we'll get to a majority some kind of way and keep voting until we get to 4 votes.
Good. Okay.
That's how it works.
Alrighty. I'm going to bounce around a bit. Probably the longest part of the meeting is going to be the review of the amendments of the employee handbook. And Glenda is here. She's our director of HR. You've been working on this, for almost a year now. And so there are some changes. A lot of it is just clarification. So do you want to lead us through this, please?
Sure. We just became aware, and did you all get to open up the attachment that you got from Wayne?
It only opened as a PDF, black and white. There were some sections that were in red and tables, and I don't know if those were pertinent changes or not.
No, actually, what you've been handed.
Well, what was in red were changes.
But it does not
those
represent
were
this, though.
If it was in red, it could have just been reorganization of a table.
Moving or reshaping or adding
Exactly.
something.
The one you're talking about was the vacation table. That did not change. We just reorganized a little bit of how we stated it to the employees. There are no changes to the policy itself. And so what I handed you tonight, as I was just talking about with Stephen, are really just the material changes that actually are policy changes that we are recommending.
It would have been helpful to scan this and send it out as opposed to...
Yes, and we do not know why that didn't come through that way, because both Jason and I
had
saw
a
the
complete
markups.
copy of the handbook that showed all the changes. So you had the complete book that would show what was stricken out and what was added. And that was, I didn't show up. Yeah.
Okay.
There were flags in there. But
You will get that. I'm sorry it wasn't given to you now. But I think what Glenda's telling you is that the meat of the changes is what you've got in front of you here, and she'll be happy to answer those questions. But
well, Glenda,
that's prepared.
On the one that was sent out to us, it had some yellow flags on certain paragraphs. Did that mean anything?
Yeah, he was showing me that, and I did not see that on my side. I don't know why that came across differently, honestly.
Okay.
Like I said, what you have in this document here is not the full handbook. We can certainly forward the whole handbook. I mean, what do we do? Send it as a Word document instead of a PDF?
I think it was a complete Word document that we got.
No, it was a PDF.
It was in the PDF
file.
but I think it was a complete copy of the handbook.
Yeah,
Right.
It was. Yes.
Right, but I don't know
But
why.
for some reason, because when we send out the packet, we have to do it as a PDF, so it has to be converted. And it dropped a lot of that stuff.
Oh,
The coloration.
In
the conversion, it didn't pick up.
What we noticed when we looked at his iPad is what you see is as it exists with the changes, but not
Here's
all
what
of
we
it.
need to do. We need to get that printed out with all the changes on it on paper and scan that in color.
That's
what you
Yes.
Yeah.
This needs to be scanned.
Yeah, but it's
The
more
whole
than just
document.
the whole document. These are the meat of the changes, but what so you can see it all in context where it is and all that, so.
Right, so the majority of, when you get that, the majority of what you will see are clarifications. Like I said, there's a chart in there, and basically, we're just trying to make the chart easier for people to understand and read. For example, in the chart of the vacation policy, the police department is not a separate chart, and we made a separate chart just for the police department. It's that kind of changes that we made. The other changes you will see are, instead of saying things like will be, we changed a lot of language to may be. For example, in the case of speaking to an annual review, if for some reason someone wouldn't get one right on their anniversary date, that will be keeps us from a guarantee of at your 1 year anniversary or annually in January. So those kinds of things.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, you guys, that's fine. I was just going to start walking
Yeah, go ahead,
through.
go ahead.
Okay.
You may.
So the document you have in front of you is, like we just discussed, are going to be the material changes to policies. And the first page that you see is page 11, the drug and alcohol-free workplace. We have inserted, because of new laws in the state of Arkansas, additional language about medical marijuana. And in particular, we've added language at the bottom under the last two paragraphs on page 11, talking about under no circumstances are employees allowed to be in possession of alcohol or controlled medication, including medical marijuana. So inserting additional medical marijuana language. Also talking about requiring that someone, if they are tested and found to have marijuana in their system, they would have to prove that they have a medical marijuana card. Obviously, that doesn't apply to most of our employees in this way. Most of our employees are in safety-sensitive positions and therefore cannot have any marijuana in their system, even if they would have a medical marijuana card. So this would only apply to those
Non-uniform employees.
non-uniform, basically. And like our streets department,
You've got
The street department.
you've got street department
Yeah.
people that are included in that, it's not all just uniformed.
They can't have it either.
right. So like I said, the majority of our employees can't even,
Well, that would include pain medications and things like that as well, wouldn't it?
yeah, controlled
All
substances.
those, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that really isn't changing the policy in general, just as it relates to medical marijuana.
I think if I could add one thing, that don't allow the medical marijuana thing to throw confusion at you. You could think of it as any traditionally prescribed medication. If someone has to take a prescription pain medication, for example, that's more of a traditional, I'll just call it a traditional prescription. You can't be under the influence of that and drive our vehicles. And so what we're saying is medical marijuana is treated the same way. It's basically
Right,
what
it's
we're
the
trying to get
addition
at.
of, yeah.
Yes.
And then on the next page, there is a section that we added about post-accident testing. This is something that we would do, but it was not stated in the handbook previously. So we added the language about the requirement of post-accident testing.
Which will leave the urine testing and the breathalyzer testing as an option. So they're not both required. You say and or. So you can do one or the other or both, but if...
We have a separate ordinance that requires all that. This is just incorporating the terms of your existing
So
ordinance.
why wouldn't we not say urine testing and breathalyzer?
Because we want the option to use what we what we want to use, and we may not have both of those tests available to us at the same time. We may be able to get a breath sample but not have access to a urine collection process, or vice versa for some reason, depending on circumstances. So the city wants options as it relates to that.
So contrary to the ordinance, and this is your option vehicle.
Well, it's not contrary to the ordinance. It's in conformity with the ordinance.
But I understood you to say that it was required by ordinance.
It is. Testing, but not all kinds of testing.
What's the point? We're gonna have to move forward.
Yeah.
It says urine testing and or breathalyzer. So what are we arguing about?
We can make them do both, we can do one or the
It says
other.
and or.
I guess my question was, if the ordinance says both, then this should say.
Well,
both.
Okay, it says and or.
And or, and it
Let's not
should
belabor it.
mirror the ordinance.
Yeah, we got 14 pages of material changes to work through, so let's go.
The next page is 18. What we're doing in this page is adding a employee status called casual employees. Right now, we don't have that type of person defined separately. They've been called a part-time employee. Someone who would fit into a casual employee status would be somebody who we have possibly on payroll, who is a firefighter. This is a real example. Someone who is a firefighter who doesn't work for us routinely, but if we need him, we can call him in. So he exists as an employee, but we don't regularly pay him. We only pay him if we call him in need.
One of the reasons for that is because we had two categories, and then there are certain benefits that accrue to part-time, which did not particularly fit given the circumstances of how these people were working. And so we wanted to make sure that we could separately categorize them so that those particular part-time benefits did not accrue, because these are very sort of haphazard relationships they have with us in terms of when they work for us. So that was one of the main reasons we need to have a distinction for that.
Thank you, Jason.
Does that include the EMF people that you have come in? Do you have EMF people come in, Chief Sims?
We do some, occasionally.
So that would fit under this too?
Yeah, I think that's what she's talking about, the fire and EMS. That's generally how we do that. We hire people in to work at, to help us work certain things.
Yeah, I don't know if we've even had one work since I started almost a year ago.
We haven't, but we have in the past.
Yeah. Okay. All right, the next page is relating to vacancies and promotions. We are just changing the language here to state that if there is an opening, we will announce by way of message to employees through city email. We got a lot of feedback that people didn't really look there on the bulletin boards anymore. So all of our postings are on our city website. They're within our own ADP, which is our payroll system. Anybody can look at them there. And then also we send out an email when we have an opening to notify our employees. The next page is 46. Tuition assistance for acquiring a paramedic certification. The reason we felt this was important to add this language in here is our current tuition reimbursement program allows people to receive a benefit up to $1,500 a year in tuition assistance. It's limited to that. Any one person cannot exceed that benefit within a calendar year. We have had and supported paramedic certification training because we need them. When we hire, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, Chief Sims, but when we hire firefighters, they are EMTs. We want to get them to be paramedics. That is more expensive than our regular tuition reimbursement program of $1,500. Right now the program costs about $2,200 a year. And so we are setting apart this program to allow for whatever that cost is each year, but not to exceed the federal maximum. Like I said, it's $2,200 approximately right now per year. The federal maximum is $5,000 that we can give towards tuition reimbursement. So we wanted to make sure that we specified that so as not to limit those people's benefit. Questions about that?
When you say the federal maximum, is that how much you can give without taxation?
Correct.
Is that, yeah.
Correct.
I would like to propose that the repayment schedule that you have in here, instead of being spread over 24 months, that it be spread over 5 years with 100 for the first increment, then 80, 60, 50, 25, and then 0 after 5 years. I think we're too generous.
Say that again, please.
I think we're too generous on the repayment of tuition assistance for people who come and leave.
No, that's not what it says.
No, that's
In this
not.
reading, yeah.
Well, what this is, I'm looking at the paragraph on page 47,
Right.
repayment of tuition assistance.
No, it has to be repaid, Larry, prior to their termination date. This tells what percentage they have to repay.
Correct.
Based on how long it is since they finished the class.
Right.
So it's not,
It's not how long they have to repay it.
it's the time after they complete the course then.
Right.
Yeah.
If you leave a year after completing the course, the second line applies to you. You're going to have to repay 75% of your tuition.
Then I misinterpreted.
Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions? Brenda?
Continuing on to page 54. So the accumulation for uniformed police officers. We are proposing that the sick leave balance for uniformed police officers that they can accumulate while working for us be moved from 420 hours of sick leave up to 720 hours of sick leave. And that number has been put forward based on our competition in the area, basically. We want to be in line with what the other police departments are doing as far as that sick leave accumulation goes for Bentonville, Springdale. A lot of other ones outside of our area are at this level as well. This only applies while they're employed. They do not get paid out that additional if they were to leave.
If I could add something there, state law mandates that we would pay out up to 480 hours. And so, and that's the cap. But what we've learned is that our regional neighbors are allowing, and we have thus far only allowed an accrual up to that point. But what our regional neighbors are allowing is more of an accrual, but if you separate employment with us, you're only paid out for the 480. So that does allow a little more grace in terms of being ill while they're working for us, and as a way to remain competitive with other like departments. So that's what that's about.
It's part of our retention strategy.
So that's 17 weeks.
It's a lot.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure of that.
I was going to save this question for the end, but it's pertinent to those comments. Mayor Christie, have all the department heads participated in this or had an opportunity to review these changes?
Yes.
Okay, so as far as the department heads are all on board with these changes?
Yes, they are.
Very good.
Okay, the next page is page 62, paid leave for firefighters with occupationally caused cancer. I might just let Jason speak to
Well,
this.
we had a state law mandate put on us that we already have to comply with this, but we need to incorporate it in our employee handbook. And so basically what the state determined is that under certain circumstances, firefighters that can show a cancer that has been caused by their occupation, in other words, caused by the fact they were fighting fires, then there are some additional rights that they have pursuant to state law regarding leave and benefits. And so what you're seeing there is our implementation of the state mandate. It does not expound upon that. This was an issue, I don't know if you recall hearing these discussions at the Municipal League Conference probably a year ago or at least 6 months ago. From the league questioned this quite significantly just because of the fact of being able to prove what is an occupationally caused cancer. And then there are presumptions in there which they are what they are. And so the legislature has spoken and we're going to have to comply. And so this is what we've got. And we wanted to include that in our policy manual just so we've got that in there with everything else. Like I said, we've already got to comply with this because it's state law. We just wanted to incorporate this in with the rest of our policies.
Next page is 62. Oh, sorry, that was the one you were just on.
You got the jury duty one at the very bottom there. Number 62.
Yes, sorry. Okay, thank you. At the bottom of page 62, basically what we are proposing with jury duty, there has been a policy in place that said if you were on jury duty, you get paid your stipend, you pay it back to the city. We're proposing that we don't require that we try to get that money back from them, just because it's de minimis amount of money that they're getting. They incur expenses on their own just by going to have to go somewhere, park somewhere, eat lunch away from home, whatever. So we're just proposing we drop that repayment part of that.
Do they get parking allowance and lunch allowance and those kinds of things when they're on jury duty?
If they don't get, the county takes charge of all that. When you're called for jury duty, you get there's a basic amount of appearance fee that you get per day. If you're actually on a jury, they will take you to lunch and feed you while you're on duty. Typically, that's just going to be a lunch meal, but it could be a dinner meal if you're going to have a long jury deliberation, and that's paid for out of the county budget. They typically order sandwiches or take them to a restaurant.
What is the local stipend for jury duty?
I should have known you were going to ask that. It used to be $20 a day. It may have gone to $50. I can't recall. It's been a while since I looked, but it's a very small amount of money.
And the rationale for making the change, because as I understood it, the city would compensate them the difference between the $20 a day and what they were receiving in their position, is what I understand this to read. And so the reason for making the change is what?
It becomes kind of difficult to administer, actually,
Yeah.
because we don't even know when somebody's on jury duty always. So.
And I suspect it costs more to administer
Yes, it does.
the deduction than it
Exactly.
does to
And
just...
getting proof back from the employee of how many days, and which can be, I mean, they would do it for
I
us.
spent a lot of money trying to collect less.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of work to collect $20 back, and you're going to pay them 99% of their salary anyway.
Well,
So
if the
it's-
jury duty is $50, that's a
Or-
whole different story.
or whatever amount it is. That's correct.
Okay, can I go to the next one?
Next one is page 71. This is additional language about hourly employees not being allowed to use their personal cell phones, personal email, or city email to conduct city business while off the clock. The reason I want to add this language in here is there are instances where managers will start conversations with their employees about work when that hourly person is away from work. And if that happens, technically that person should be clocking in. It's not always an easy thing to do if you start getting into a conversation. When I first moved here, I worked for a legal department where this became a really big issue because employees don't care. They just want to get some work done and they don't want to have to say, I'll call you back. They clock in, they have the conversation, they clock out. Whether the employee wants to be generous and just work for you at that time, we can't do that. That is illegal to have them working off the clock, and that's considered working off the clock. And so we just want to clarify
It
that.
creates wage and hour problems, could create unintentional overtime. Where this comes up is that if you have a bad separation from an employee, then it's, oh, well, there's all these times I replied to your emails and didn't get paid. And then it becomes a much bigger issue, so we need to just clarify that they're not allowed to do that. Both so they know it and the supervisors know it.
California even has a law that goes as far as you will not contact the employees over their lunch hour. So you have to know when everybody goes to lunch, because the moment that you do, they have to go on the clock. So it's a big issue.
And the POA has been burned many times with the same thing.
Well, and it really opens a can of worms,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if one person
They can wait for a
says
long
that-
time to do it, too. They don't have to do it the day they leave. They can wait 18 months and then come back.
Yeah, it's, and then everybody hears about it and
Mhm.
increasing of a mess, so. Better to do it right up front. That's what we're trying to get at here, is to do everything in the legal way we can. The next one is change about cloud computing. Basically, as you can see, what we're doing is, well, you can't see. We had a list of certain software that we had listed in our employee handbook, which doesn't make sense anymore.
We have that.
Oh, you do
It's all
see that?
scheduled, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Because technology changes so quickly, we can't possibly list the technology that's okay today but not tomorrow. So we're eliminating, specifying which systems that are going to be acceptable and okay. And basically saying, anybody want something on your computer, check with IT. That's the way it should be done anyway. And then, I believe the last one we have here is appropriate attire.
You know, so let me ask you something. The comprehensive plan 2040, Doug sent, in an email, and there's a link to it, and it's a zip file and it's large. The only way I could download it was, one of the ways is to download it straight to Google Drive. So I'm not a city employee, but I'm a city council member, so I want to be certain that I'm not, if I just choose to do that, that's something that I could do, because that's a file that's related to the city.
I think you could.
But, yeah,
We need to
yeah.
talk to John, but I think the changes we're trying to make would definitely make sure it was okay that you did that.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, if I would choose some other storage versus what the city's using, you know what I mean?
Well, you're.
Am I guess, in certain cases like this, limited to the same requirements as city employees?
Well, you're a city officer, so to the extent, you're kind of a special employee, that you do work for us, you get paid. But if you're talking about, you get an email and you look at your email on your personal computer at home, that may not be your city iPad, and then you're looking at, okay, I need to decipher this PDF, I'm going to use Adobe to do that, I need to download it, and maybe that happened to not be on a list or something, or we have a preferred software to do that. You're on your private computer. I would always suggest to you that if you're doing your official work, keep it on your iPad. If you want to download it, or also download it again on your private computer, just so you can look at it a different way, I don't think the city of Bella, as long as that's not hooked to our network, I don't think the city of Bella Vista is going to have a...
Not much I can, I'm just saying they're pretty limited, so I don't know, I would just ask a question. I don't know if there's any crossover there, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think your point is a good one, which is we don't want things that are connected to our network messing up the network, basically. That's kind of the rule of thumb to use. I think Jason's point is a very good one.
Okay,
Okay, and then the last one that we are looking at is updating the appropriate attire. Basically, we're moving from men and women to an overall review of what is acceptable to wear in the office. And also addressing a little bit more about jeans. That's becoming a bigger thing and has for many years in many organizations. We have certain roles, for example, IT, where they're crawling around looking at equipment under people's desks, different things during the day, where we want to allow for a little flexibility. The same thing with some of our employees that might be regularly in the office, might be on site for a day doing this or that. This allows for a little flexibility in that as well.
okay, so the action item now is to send out.
Yeah, we're going to have to
Everybody
send
can
out
see
an
it?
update.
Well, I think what I'm going to suggest, it's a little work, that we need to print out the entire employee handbook that shows the additions and deletions all together on paper, and then scan that into a PDF. That way it's not rendering it back into a PDF from Word, and so that way you'll get something, and in color, so that you'll get the notes, they're under the red color showing where it's changed, and then you'll have it all there to know what we're taking out, what we're putting in, and it'll all be in context for you. A little hard to view context when it's just kind of isolated.
Yeah.
Or we can just give you the current version of the book and email that to you, and you can go compare if you want to. But I think it'd be easier to do what I
It's
suggested.
easier to see.
But you're really saying that this review we just had, this is the substantive changes?
These are going to be the material changes to actual policies. The rest of it is going to be either clarification of a policy, expanding on the description of a policy. One of the other things I would use for an example is where we talk about our employee benefits. We talk about the flex plan and the medical plan and all these different plans, but for some reason the HSA was missed, the health savings account. So we added that language just to make sure we had each bit in there correctly. Where we talk about each of those types of benefits, we also clarified and put the same language in for eligibility purposes for each one. They weren't standard language for life and HSA and medical. So we standardized the language that applies in each of those cases too. I would say when you get the full version, the chart that you referred to that you could see is going to be very confusing because it had so many iterations that there's lines upon lines upon lines of information. So I'm going to probably scan it if it's okay with my notes, like handwritten notes to the side. No?
Well, they're adopting what's on that paper, and I don't want them to adopt your notes too. See what I mean?
Okay.
So I mean, if you want to put an explanation, like something, an explanation to add to it.
I'll put a
Yeah,
separate
just
page
put it
of
on a separate piece of
explanation.
paper.
Because after you make too many changes over top of changes, it's very difficult to read.
Am I correct? Just like the police sick leave, isn't there a table that goes with that too that we had to change some numbers on, or am I thinking?
The
of something?
vacation, not the
The
sick leave.
vacation, okay.
But we didn't change accruals or eligibility or anything. We just laid it
It was a
out.
formatting issue more than
Basically,
anything.
your presentation was different. You put it into one table rather than.
Yes, exactly. Actually, we put it into more tables, which makes it even more messier.
Well, that's what the one that you sent was, they had more tables in there.
Yes, exactly. So it probably looks a lot, you might want to look at that version compared to what we send you next, just so you can see how messy it got.
So we'll try and get that out tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you have questions, please get to Glenda before the meeting. And she'll be more than happy to answer questions and take you through it.
I just have one question. I did, believe it or not, scan through every page today. Didn't read every word, but I did get through it. In the case of maybe an issue with an employee, between a manager and employee, I just want the first step is like a verbal conversation, kind of like a verbal warning, if you will. If there needs to be something corrected, whatever that might be. And then, it seems like the documentation may begin if there's further action that needs to be taken. Is the verbal still documented by the manager? Maybe just a note that
It
you
should be.
have to mention it to the employee. He just goes back, writes a note, and puts it in the file.
Best practice. Could say, spoke to employee about
And that's
Yes.
it. There's been not anything really documented between the manager and the employee until the next
Right.
issue. Okay.
Oftentimes it'll be just by way of somebody will send me an email and let me know that they had a conversation, and then I can save that email to their file.
Okay.
Now, I would say this, that's best practice, no doubt about it. I think the city reserves the right to, in any circumstance, to use a grade of discipline up to and including termination. So if we needed to terminate someone for some reason before they'd ever been talked to or before they'd ever been counseled about something, you could have an issue. I think the city could do that, but we typically don't try to do that. We try to work through a progressive, when I say progressive, I mean a discipline in stages, basically.
Yeah, I understand. I just said if there was a verbal, it was that initial conversation
Yeah,
documented.
that is, like you said, best practices. We hope we get that. Most managers would probably make a note on their own calendar somewhere, even if they didn't send it to me.
Plus in APT, if someone's taking a sick day and needs to have an explanation as well, and we watch that
Right.
too.
We can make notes if they're absent in our payroll system.
Okay, Glenda, thank you very much for a full year of doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, we'll move on to the top of the board. The resolution designating, authorizing, dispersing officers and the Municipal Depository Board for the City of Bella Vista for the calendar year 2020. We basically took the names and just plunked them in as they are today. Again, for those of you who may not be aware of this, this is part of every January when we go through this. So the first is who can sign the checks. And it's the mayor, it's the finance director, it's the mayor pro tem, it's the city clerk and the police chief, and the council member Jim Wozniak has been on this for years as well. It gives us enough diversity so that if people are away on vacation or sick, then we can still pay the bills and get them out the door. And the second part of this resolution is the Municipal Depository Board. It's myself and it's the finance director, and at the moment it's Councilmember Fowler. And those are meetings where we've been notified by our portfolio manager that certain CDs have either been recalled or they're coming to the end of life, and he has already researched and he gives us options as to where we might want to reinvest the funds. And so we bring the board together. The meetings are usually quite quick because Cruz, who is our investment counselors, lays out all the options and says, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. And of course, we're always trying to get the best interest rate, but we also have to watch the recalls because sometimes you get a great interest rate, but the recall could be as little as 3 months later. It doesn't mean they will, but that's part of the discussion that we get into. Any discussion on this at all? Okay.
So the mayor pro tem, that's a separate election?
Yes, as I mentioned at the top, we will be starting off the meeting on Monday by having the election for the mayor pro tem if an election is required. Okay, do you see it on the top of your agenda?
Next to business.
Oh.
Next to the word business?
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that. I didn't think that was right.
Okay, the next is a resolution amending the 2020 city budget to appropriate $55,000 in undesignated reserves to the City Hall Police Fire Security Fence Project. This is unfortunately as a result of the shooting of the officer in Fayetteville. We became very concerned about our officers, where they park their cars. It's open and exposed. Someone quite literally could park on the, say, the southbound ramp, run up the hill, bang, 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 and leave, and we'd never find them. And so we need to make that a lot more secure. We did actually go out and we used a site survey, and Tim Cook actually went out and measured so that we could see where the easement from the state meets our property line, and he measured that out. And then he also put down some fluorescent orange paint. And essentially, we decided that we would have a chain link fence that will start at the corner of Mr. Kelly's office, go around behind the propane tank, all along the backside where the fire and the police are, bend around the corner, and come up to where the trees are that flower every spring, bring the fence through there, and then we would have a gate for the cars to get through. It would have sensors on the police side, on the parking side, so that when they're approaching the gate, it'll come up. It won't be simply a gate of one bar. It'll be a full mesh gate with the wire at the top that will go up, and then it'll come down. On the other side, there'll be a fob, so that if they have to get in, they'll put their fob against the reader, and it'll go up, and they can access, and it'll be timed so it comes back down again. We do have the money in the budget. If you remember, we moved the $174,000 for the street department car wash back into just general, and so we do have the funds to be able to do this. We still have to go to bid because of the price. But
Mayor, I've got to ask, because this is a budget amendment to put in the budget. Is it already in the budget?
It's in the budget, but not labeled for this. It's not sitting in capital projects.
Okay. We need to move it around. Okay.
So we need to move it into the capital projects. Chief is here if you want to discuss it at all, and he can answer questions.
We had a good report, I think it was in December, from Chief Graves. I guess my question is, we had a chance to put this in the budget itself, so we didn't have to go through the amendment process. Is there a rationale why we didn't do that?
Because we were trying to get the budget approved, and it hadn't happened yet out in Fayetteville.
Yeah, you're asking why this wasn't actually put in the budget. I think the timing, I think we already had the budget just about completed when the Fayetteville incident happened.
But we had talked about that before.
We had talked about a security fence, so why haven't I done a security fence in the past?
No.
You know, I had looked at it, to be honest with you. Of course, hindsight's 20/20, you know. Knowing that we were trying to build a new police station, I knew that some of those security issues, well, not some, they would be addressed with a new building. So at the time, I wasn't thinking we needed to spend that money. Of course, Fayetteville happens, we look at it again, knowing even that the fire department's going to stay there, not knowing really, you know, when the new station will be built, if it is. We decided we need to put a fence in now. And then that fence, like I said, that fence will benefit the fire station and that property in general, because the fire folks, they do also need a secure parking lot on that backside. So I think overall it's going to increase the security of that entire property, which we're going to continue to use in one capacity or the other. If you would like, I do have we got an estimate. That's how we sort of came up with a number. I could sort of give you a rundown of what the project will include. It's up to 550 feet of 6-foot galvanized chain link fence with 277 feet of privacy slats. That's in the very back where the officers park up against the building to go in the side door. It's so close to the road, we thought we'd probably need privacy slats just in that area, just so when they're loading their cars, taking prisoners out, it's not so easy to see them from that angle. There won't be privacy slats around the entire site because we don't think it's really necessary. Plus, if you have privacy slats everywhere, you can't see what's outside the fence, and that's not very good for security as well. You want to be able to see what's outside the fence. It'll have a 16-foot lift gate, which will be 16 feet long is the lift gate, 6 foot tall fence. So the fence that's the lift gate will be a fully a chain link fence, just like the rest of the fence. So you can't just walk through it. There'll also be a 4-foot walk gate that'll be on the side of that, so we can get through it on foot. So that's really the extent of the project. There's some additional money that's added on above and beyond this quote. That's how we got to the $55,000, because we have to have Guardtronics in come out and do some work to get the fobs and everything to work properly. So we put some money into this amount for that, to cover that in the end. We may not use the full amount, but we wanted to have that in there to cover Guardtronics.
Is the lift gate more secure than a sliding gate?
It's not more or less secure, but it's easier as far as that piece of property, because the sliding gate's going to have to slide out and stick out the other side, 15 feet or so. A lift gate, you don't have to have that clear on the other side for it to come through. Does that make sense? So lift gate works better for us in that area than a sliding gate.
So it'll be fairly close to the back of the parking lot along the highway?
Yes.
So you won't have the 16 feet that you would be able to slide into?
The gate's going to be just around the corner as you come in the driveway. You got the 2 handicap spots right there in the corner of the building.
Mm-hmm.
The gate will be between that and the tree,
That's right.
not behind the building.
No, I understand that.
We had the company come out and they recommended a lift gate as opposed to a rolling gate. I think it's 6 1/2 dozen the other, to be honest with you.
Although the lift gate will probably work faster based on
It will work
experience.
faster as far as getting in and out. Yeah, if you go through the gate at the street garage, it's, you got to wait a little while for that thing to spool up. So the lift gate will be faster.
So it's a 6-foot fence, and I guess there's some type of deterrent that goes
Yeah,
along the
so it's a
top of
6-foot fence with some barbed wire, industrial type barbed wire, not like concertina wire, not like prison wire, but just sort of industrial barbed wire on the top to discourage folks from trying to climb over it.
That's about another foot added on.
It'll add another foot to it, yes. So it'll be about 7 feet total when it's all said and done. Of course, nothing stops everything, but this is going to discourage folks from just walking into the areas they shouldn't be, and it'll give the officers a level of security that I think we need and they deserve.
further
Would
discussion?
you have a security camera on the outside of the fence? I'm just curious if people might be approaching it, thinking about coming over.
We already, well, okay, so we already do have security cameras out there. We'll have to look, in the end and see if we have to reposition them to maybe catch somebody who would be crossing the highway trying to come up that grassy hill area towards the fence. That's a good thing. We could look at that to see if we need to readjust some of those cameras. But we do have cameras out there. We may readjust them and make sure they can catch the exterior of the fence, though the fence being not slatted or opaque in most of the areas, our current camera system should catch anybody on the outside of it.
Question, any others? Chief, thank you. We'll move on to the next resolution, which is authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to enter into trail license agreement with the Bella Vista Village Property Owners Association, Inc., for the purposes of facilitating an extension of the Razorback Greenway into the city. This is, I believe there's a map in front of you. This is the proposed spur that'll go through Blowing Springs, Manchester, up Houston, up to Commonwealth, and then hang a left. Doug, is this from your crew?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I wanted you to see, you see the little dash in there at where Manchester meets Houston?
Yes.
That's the two parcels outlined in the agreement where the maintenance for the POA runs from Blowing Springs up to that intersection, and then from that intersection to Metville, the city will mow the edge.
Okay.
So city's got the east half and POA's got the west half, pretty much.
Well, okay, what you're talking about is the Blowing Springs maintenance area that the POA has to look after today. Okay, but the rest will be joint. It won't be just city maintenance.
Yeah, if you'll read is that right, Jason?
That's not what it said.
No, this is not a maintenance agreement, please
This has
understand.
nothing to do with
No, but
maintenance
it
at all.
mentions it in the license agreement.
Right, but it falls under our existing maintenance obligations. The license, the parcels that are implicated in the license are the parcels that are listed. Now, the parcel numbers are not reflected on this map you have here. But currently there are trails in Blowing Springs that connect to our existing trail system, but those are fully maintained by the POA. They were on private property and were not a part of our city project. They were just connected. So this Razorback Greenway, this is going to be the paved, like we've had all up through the corridor, extension of that. And so that is going to be a connecting, that's the red in there. Isn't that what's shown in the red?
That's the end of the...
That's the number 2 is the end of the current one?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Then
End of the red is the
Mercy
end of the
Way
Greenway.
Bridge,
I was
those two will
referencing-
connect to the end of Mercy Way at, what is it, the street there?
Lambeth?
Lambeth? Is that right?
Yeah, what you're seeing, number 2 is just in front of the bridge. Okay, if you look at number 5, that's where most people today take the Greenway. So they go from the tip of Lake Bella Vista, they go up through number 5, so that's between the soccer fields and it's the back of Mercy Clinic. They cross over the Hawk Crossing and then they go into Blowing Springs. With this, after the bridge is in play and finished, number 2 will actually go under the bridge and do, I call it a New Jersey jug handle. It's a big loop that comes around and they'll go over the bridge and they'll go into the Little Sugar Creek Shopping Center. So the point from number 10 is where the extension for the Razorback today ends. Number 3 is where it picks up and it's actually going through the POA property. Would that be correct, Joan? Yep. And then at the demarc where the line is, then it continues on, it goes up Houston, and it curls and comes back into the Metfield thing off Commonwealth. Now you may remember at I believe it was the December meeting, we agreed to bring in the first phase of the funding from the Walton Family Foundation for this, as well as the bridge. So there is a linkage between the two.
So the funding for the yellow line was a part of the adoption we did in December for the funding, along with the Mercy Way Bridge.
Correct. That was phase 1. We will still get more funding coming in from the Walton Family Foundation for both projects. This is just a maintenance, I'm sorry, this is just
The license,
a
just
license
the usage
agreement.
of the land, that's it.
I was referencing number 3 a while ago. If you look at paragraph 3, where it lists those 2 parcels where maintenance, future maintenance on the trail between the city and the POA, I just wanted you to see that on the map.
Now, there is one, there was, when we looked through they drafted the license, and so we went back and reviewed it. There's a whole list of parcel numbers. We caught there's one that's actually a Cooper parcel that does not need to be in this. So we're going to take that out and we'll give you the corrected version. It should just have that one line. You won't even notice it probably in your review of it, but it'll just be one of those parcel numbers will be taken out in that big long list.
So I did have a question, because I've been asked on just the regular trail system, right? And you've got them listed, parcels owned by licensor. So what are those parcels? Are those right-of-ways as you cross streets?
They are typically through POA common property. That's typically what they have been.
Those are the parcels that,
Where they
if the
build it.
POA approves, they will be allowing construction and maintenance.
And allowing the general public to use it.
Oh, that's right, we're the licensee, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're the licensing. Yeah. We're on the receiving end of this.
Yeah. So does this trail pass over any property owned by the city at all? It's just a question. I
It'll
don't.
cross an easement.
They cross the city streets at some point or another.
So like
that
that.
right away.
Yeah.
Okay, city streets and the right-of-ways and things like that
But-
would be the city.
Yeah, we don't own any property per se.
Right.
I'm not sure if the builders are actually going to do this, but on the back 40, for example, there's some areas that they go through and they have actually purchased the land or the lot that it goes through. So it's a little different. The license doesn't pertain to those at all. And then there's a little bit of Cooper where we have a separate license on the back 40 as well because it's crossing through his property.
It's important to know legally, too, if people own property that's next to the common property where these licenses exist, they already have a right to get on common property because they own those lots and they're members. So they have the private right to enter upon there and say cut across to get to the trail or something like that. So that may be part of what some builders are planning. They'll build a house on a lot that may border some common property, and then the trail may be down there a little bit. Well, a person who lived in that house could just walk on down to the trail, and because if they're a member, assuming they're not just a member of the general public, but they have a right to be on that POA common property as a part of that, then it's kind of, they have a right to connect in that way.
And I should add that the POA Board of Directors has not adopted this. We're actually ahead of the game with them. It's just a matter of timing. Tom and I talked about it this morning.
Well, you say it's a matter of timing. It's a matter of their approval, and I appreciate somebody's got to kind of go
Take the
first.
bull by the
It's a
horns.
chicken and egg
Yep.
type thing, and the city is willing to do it so long as it is approved by the POA board, obviously.
Yep.
But there's something still that needs to be adjusted here, and I appreciate this resolution is a work in progress. But our terminology needs to be accurate here. This is not a trail license agreement.
No, it is a trail license agreement. It's not a maintenance agreement.
No. Well, hear me out, if you
Okay,
would, Mayor
sure.
Christie. There are no trails being built. Trails are back 40, trails are central trails. And because this matter of trails is still a contentious issue in our community, our terminology needs to be accurate. And I've looked at 5 pages of the agreement, and trails are never mentioned once. There are no trails in this proposition. This is a hard surface, it's a sidewalk. It is not more trails. And I think we need to be accurate in that. I've had conversations with people where they've said, hey, I hear there's more trails coming, more trails coming. This is not more trails. The universe of people who are willing to be out in the woods, riding a mountain bike, or hiking, is one universe. But the universe of people who are willing to walk on a sidewalk is far greater. This appeals to a far greater portion of our community. It's not a trail.
But it's a spur of what has been officially called the Razorback Greenway Trail.
I don't think it's called trail. And it's not referred to that anywhere in here. I would contend it is not a trail.
Well, in 7, it does refer to after construction of the Greenway.
Yes, sir, exactly. And it refers to even the title of the document. And I know the resolution apparently hasn't been written yet, but even the title of the document.
Resolution should be in the packet. Is the resolution not in the packet?
No.
Yeah, it's there.
There.
It's there. It's
No,
at the
sir.
end, follows it.
No, sir. We have the title, and then the title is not down in here. If you'll look at our agenda tonight, when it gets to that section, it doesn't state the resolution like we would typically do on a resolution.
Is it not attached?
And instead, the document goes straight to the title, which says, Limited Terminable License Agreement.
Right.
And so what I'm proposing, and then you won't ever find, in the next 5 pages of text, you won't ever find the word trails. And the reason is we're not building trails. This is not a trail. This is completely different. We need to make this distinction
There's
for
the
the benefit
resolution
of
is at
this.
the very end, but
It's in there, it follows the other part of the document.
Okay. I know this is a work in progress, and here's what I'm telling you. I'm not going to support more trails. Okay? That's where I'm at. This is not a trail. I'm happy to support it if we can get the terminology to be accurate.
Well, one thing I would just say is, this is the proposal we were presented by the owners of the property, number one. We didn't write it. So if we don't want to accept what they're offering, then we don't need to take it. But we can't
I'm
dictate to them
suggesting-
what they're gonna offer us.
Well, and we haven't. I'm not suggesting we change anything in the agreement. The agreement can stand as it is. I'm suggesting we change the resolution.
But I would say the resolution says it's for purposes of facilitating an extension of the Razorback Greenway into the city. That's what the title of the resolution
Right?
is.
And all I'm suggesting is we strike the word trail.
It's not in
It doesn't.
Oh, you're saying a trail license
Trail li-
agreement?
well, that's
Yes,
the
it
title.
is not a trail license agreement. That is my point.
Okay, now, a lot of cities in northwest Arkansas have trails. And we told them they didn't have trails.
We have trails too. We have back 40 trails, and we have central trails.
We have
The
unimproved
Greenway is not a
trails.
trail.
I mean, I'm not arguing with you at your position, and
I know.
I've just got to have a license agreement with
It's
the
a
public.
matter of
to use it.
semantics is what it is.
Well,
I mean,
it's
if you
important
can
to
kind
know.
of like,
All right,
play to
so-
a certain part of the population, I mean, that's okay. But regardless, I mean, it's a greenway.
let me
call it
say
trail,
one
call it
thing.
whatever you want.
Order for a second, please.
I
We have
lived
too
in
many
an area that
conversations.
was completely
We don't need
covered
to
by
debate
concrete
at our work
trails.
sessions.
Gentlemen,
The debate needs to be at the regular meeting because we have minutes of the meeting, and so.
but if we strike the word trail out of there and just a license agreement with the Bella Vista, are you happy?
Correct.
Okay.
But
It's not a
actually-
trail license agreement.
they're going to want to limit the usage of the license to only for a trail purpose.
Nothing in the 5 pages limits it to a trail. It talks about construction and maintenance.
It's a construction and maintenance agreement.
That's what it is. Or a property license agreement or a license agreement. It is not a trail license agreement.
Whereas licensee has requested permission to construct a hard surface walkway on real property intended to be open to the general public for the purpose of pedestrian walking, hiking, jogging, cycling, and other human-propelled uses, the Greenway.
Correct. You'll never find the word trail in 5 pages. I've read it.
And we're not building a trail like we have around. This is a different type of thing that's being built.
Exactly. Yes, sir. We're in agreement.
So you just want to take the word trail out of it, and
It is not a trail.
you're happy by just saying it's an extension of the Razorback Greenway into the city?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Joan, do you see what he's saying? Yeah, you're okay?
Well, I would, the only agreement you're being called upon to respond to is the limited terminable license agreement.
They changed the
The,
resolution.
He just doesn't like the word trail in
I-
there.
I'm trying to get to it.
Okay.
Let me say it.
It follows the
It's at the back, it follows, and I think it may have a line in there that's unnecessary talking about the maintenance. where did it go? Right there?
It's after the notaries.
Okay, it just needs to say the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized to enter into limited terminable license agreement with Bella Vista Village POA. That would,
Parentheses, Greenway. I would put,
for purposes of facilitating the expansion of extension of the Razorback Greenway. Okay, I can fix that. I can work on the resolution language, but if we start wanting to tinker with the agreement, then we've got other parties we've got to be concerned with. That's my big point. Okay.
Okay,
have you looked at the agreement itself? Are you satisfied with all the language in there?
What does that mean by satisfied? I don't stand in agreement or disagreement with what all you intend to do.
Well,
When I review something, I'm just trying to make sure it does what the city thinks it does. And so it does do what I think the city is expecting for it to do. I'm not putting up the seal of approval on anything that you all do. It's not for me to agree or disagree with any item on your agenda.
I guess one of the things that's pretty silent about is what the maintenance standard is. They talk about maintenance, but what does that mean?
That's in a separate agreement from this.
Okay.
And that's not being altered by this.
And this document allows for the construction, but it doesn't allow for, and maintenance, but it doesn't allow for reconstruction.
Well, I think that probably could be included in maintenance and repair.
No, I don't know if it is. It's certainly silent about that issue.
Okay.
okay, guys, all right.
Are there any issues with the covenants?
I don't speak to covenants, private covenants at all.
That's the POA. Remember, this came from the POA.
Yeah, okay.
So they would have, I suppose, addressed anything that had to be along that line.
And it talks about insurance coverage in here during construction, but it doesn't say anything about after construction.
We would not want it after because that would waive our immunity. We're immune to the extent that
Okay, so
that we're not covered by insurance
covered
for people that break an ankle and trip on a crack or
All
something.
right, so are we going to own the whole thing even though POA is going to maintain it?
We're not owning anything, we're taking a license. That's the nature of a license agreement. It is a right to use, on behalf of the general public, their right to use the property. It's still owned by the POA, but it is a license for the benefit of the general public. That way we can take public dollars and expend toward it, because otherwise we cannot use tax dollars to
So
improve.
none of this
property.
will be property of the...
We're not taking ownership of the property
Okay,
at all.
even though this is a license to construct, I'm assuming we're going to do the construction?
Well, there's construction that's going to be done. We may end up being the conduit for that as we've been in the past, but the money's going to be donated. So, Mayor, I'd have to have you answer how the process of the construction of that, because that's a different type of construction than what we've done.
It'll be the same as the Razorback Greenway extension that came from the tip of the lake into Blowing Springs. We had the last chunk from the Hawk over to the Blowing Springs first parking lot going in, okay? And as we were going into Blowing Springs and we entered into the POA property, we have a license so that we can put it in there for the use of the general public. The actual construction will be done hand in hand with whomever the Trailblazers designate as the company that's going to build it. So they will go to bid, and we will be part of that process. Because we will be paying it, they'll be giving us the money. And the reason is that they'll be going over some of our rights of way. Okay?
So are we going to be a party to that contract?
Of the construction contract, yeah. The same as we are now.
So will we be the signatory for it, even though the trail group is going to administer the construction? Is that
Mayor, if I
Yeah.
may, we are going to oversee the construction.
Yeah.
Trailblazers will not be handling the construction. We're going to hire an engineer to oversee construction during the entire project. That's actually hopefully going to go to bid later this week. But the city will be overseeing the construction.
So the contract will be a city contract?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, anything else? Okay, the final resolution is approving the mayor's appointments of Kyler Skates to position 6 on the Bella Vista Board of Construction Appeals. Kyler's done a great job for us, and we approached him to see if he would agree to continue in position 6, and he said yes, so that would expire on January the 1st, 2023. Now we get into discussion items. The first is security. You've heard about the PD. City Hall will be starting construction tomorrow. We had a bit of a delay because of the bulletproof glass that is going to go into the wicket. It had to be brought up from Florida. It has arrived and was delivered this afternoon. So the contractor will be going in. Gartronics will be involved as well because we have to put in some fobs and whatnot. I can't promise you it'll be finished by the end of the week. Depends what how the weather's going to be like tomorrow, but we're finally on the move. Central Trails. Doug, I know that you sent out an update on the trails. Do you want to give us the cliff notes, please?
Yes, sir. Central Trails.
Doug, would you mind coming up to the mic?
Sure.
Doug, bring your stuff on Kingsland and Sunset too.
Sure.
Thanks.
Central Trails update. First off, their latest estimate on completion is mid-March. So we're getting close. The bridges, Lake Windsor, Tangier Creek Bridge is now open. Gordon Hollow Bridge, the foundations are poured. Sugar Creek Bridge, the access road. Once that gets dry, they'll start getting in there and working on the foundations on that one. Those will be the only 3 bridges. Tunnels, Highlands is open. Forest Hills is open. Chelsea's open. 340 in Lancashire, tunnel number 1. This side road down here will be used for 2 weeks. 340 Lancashire tunnel number 2, which is just this way. They're already working on utility relocations there. Hopeful to start that one soon as well. Cullen Hills is open. 279 Forest Hills tunnel number 2. That's the last one to be built, and that depends on the budget and where they stand when they finish the others. There is a small section of about 12 miles that is on the soft surface trails that's been opened down near Chelsea, and they have recently asked us about putting in a parking area there pretty close to the Chelsea tunnel, just off to the side. We all think that'd be a good idea because from that tunnel, that's their only green trail, novice trail, in the central tunnels. And if you park at one of their other designated areas, you have to ride a blue trail, which is steeper and rougher terrain to get to the green trail. So Aaron Rushing told me that that's the only negative feedback they received, is that they would like to have a parking area near the green trail, which is right there at that Chelsea trail. And is John still here? Y'all are okay with that, John? So
I want to understand that.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Would you say it again now?
Yeah. So right there where the Chelsea tunnel is,
Right.
there's they have a green loop,
Right.
which is the easiest trail.
Right.
That starts from there.
Right.
But without being able to park there,
Okay.
if you park at one of the other trailheads, you have to ride a blue trail to get to that green
So
trail.
what's the ask? Is the
The
ask
ask is,
that
can
we
they put
allow
in a-
parking?
Can they put in a parking area right there next to that Chelsea tunnel on POA property?
It would appear that there's area on the west side of Chelsea, on the west side of the tunnel, that might be amenable to that.
Correct. There's a little flat triangle there.
So how many parking spaces are we talking about?
We haven't gotten that far in yet. This just came as an ask
So I think we already have designated parking at the water tower on Chelsea that's very close proximity there. Is there not,
No.
is that not adequate?
Joan, you're
Why
shaking your
not?
head.
You do have that parking there, but it goes against what Doug was mentioning. If you are a beginner, whether you're a child, a senior, wanting to ride or walk, or a child who's learning, or somebody that's just a novice, parking at the water tower is not going to get you to that green trail where you can access it. They would have to go on the street, which of course we don't want them to do. So that's why the ask is for that parking area.
And whose property is that the parking would be on?
It's a BOA.
It's BOA.
So Don, how many tunnels did we end up with?
We have
Started with
6 for sure, maybe 7.
So we lost 2 more? Because we went from 11 to 9.
And I think we've lost a couple.
Yeah,
since then.
it's the same old issue, it's the
One
pylons
was
that are
due to
buried.
low traffic, one was utilities up here at Cooper. And
Yeah.
I think, isn't also one of the tunnels would be the one that the state would be responsible for when they do the work on Lancashire, on close to 71, from the bridge.
That's correct.
That project, which I think is scheduled for later this year to begin. And I believe that's one of the tunnels.
That's correct.
It
That would
actually
be
comes from the
not,
state.
not part of this, that would be one addition to these 7.
Right, but it's connected to the trails.
Sure.
The trail is running right into that area right now in contemplation that there will be a tunnel there someday.
Sure.
So that was not one of the 11 original?
No, it was.
It was.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Doug, you have some good news on Sunset.
I do. The owner reached out to me earlier this week, or actually late last week, and let me know that they have found a contractor that's going to finish the slope, the retaining wall, and the road. Their engineers are looking at it now, and their estimated start date is about 7 weeks. So we're hopeful that in 7 weeks, they'll start. They'll have a new contractor in there that will only be working on the slope, the retaining wall, and the road. So, and the owner's rep, John, seemed very upbeat and sure of that when I spoke to him.
It's taken them quite a while to get to this because there was a lot of discussion internal to that group between architects, the actual contractor, and the designer and their own engineers. And this is the break that we've been looking for, is that Hull Dermatology finally said enough. We're going to go out and get a separate contractor to finish off the slope and the retaining wall, and then we're going to put the road back in. Because we're not going to give them their certificate of occupancy until it's up to par.
Do we know who that contractor is?
He does, but he didn't share that with me.
And the labor of love at Kingsland.
Kingsland, making good progress. There's the last mast arm that was on the ground you saw on the west side of 71. They got it up, and then there was a portion of it that's the wrong size. So they putting it on the truck. They either put it on the truck today or tomorrow, and then they're going to run it back to the steel company, repair it, and they said they would have it back Thursday or Friday of this week. So hopeful to get that up, and then the electric company will be putting in their line. We've already got that account set up and ready. So as soon as they get the mast arm up, and the traffic engineers come and set the timing and get the electric hooked up, we should have a light. They gave me an estimated finish date at the end of this month. So we've got less than 2 weeks to get that
And
done.
we'll still have to have state blessing on it. And then it's active.
The control box in the, what is it, the northeast, southeast corner of the intersection there looks like it's awfully close to Kingsland.
It is.
It's an observation.
Yeah.
Is there,
I
is
noticed
that
that.
where right-of-way is, or is that what the plan called?
And that's
for?
where state wanted it
I'm
to
not
be.
sure, that's where RDOT stuck it. And we had one get hit that was much farther away than that, so it's.
And down at the bottom of Trafalgar. Okay, any other questions for Doug? Thank you, sir. The last,
Mayor Christie, if we could, just a couple of walk-ins. Before we adjourn the meeting.
no, I'm not going to adjourn.
I know, you said we had one more.
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest a couple more. 2040 plan, we've recently had a new draft of that in front of us. Could we just hear what the path forward is for that plan?
Sure.
We're not discussing it tonight. And then I just want to make a comment before we do adjourn about tonight's meeting then.
Okay.
Well, I'm still awaiting feedback from all of you but one, all of you but one. And then once we get that, we're hopeful to get it on the February work session for discussion. So
We've got to follow the legal process of adopting a master plan, and that is, it's got to go to the planning commission. They've got to have public hearing, and then make a decision about whether they want to adopt it or make modifications to it. And of course, it eventually comes to you. You can do what you, so it's not wasted effort for you to look at it and be commenting on it. I just want to say that, but it has to go be approved by the planning commission first.
Right, okay.
Sure.
But Jason, then would the process be that if we give feedback to Doug, that will be forwarded to the planning commission?
No.
It wouldn't necessarily be that way, because the planning commission is going to get this thing and say, what's this?
Right.
And
So
that's
my point, and I'm glad we brought this up then. Nobody's waiting on us to get feedback. This is going to the planning commission, as it is. Is that correct?
Well, when I say feedback, I mean,
There were comments received.
I've received comments. We sent it back to the consultant.
Oh, okay.
The consultant came to town and sat down with us, and he showed us where he had made those changes.
Right.
I sent it back out to you all
Right.
and just said,
Is there another iteration of
What do
that
you
then?
think?
Are we going back to?
I'm hoping this is the last one, but I won't know that until I get your comments.
Yeah, Doug, the only thing I say is, and I replied back to you the second time you sent it out, I did not get it the first time. I don't know what happened, but I didn't have any email at all.
I went back and looked, and you were on there. I don't know.
I know. I mean, I saw when you resent it back out, my name was there, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because I was gone. But the timing wasn't really optimal either. There's a lot going on, but I was trying to access it today. And I'm going to have to do it on my laptop because I can't do it on any other device. It's too big.
If I make comments and suggest adjustments, what will happen with those?
I'll get those to the consultant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And perhaps another draft will be rendered before it goes to the planning
We
commission.
can.
Yep.
You could even appear at the planning commission public hearing and make comments directly to the planning commission. But obviously, as a member of the council, if you all get that and decide you want to make some tweaks to it yourself, you can. Keep in mind, this is a comprehensive plan. So it's not a zoning document in and of itself. It's not that particular. It's a vision plan. It's an idea plan. It's kind of in a broader sense. So certainly, view it in those terms and make comments in those terms. But if you want to get into details about implementation, that's a bigger discussion we'll have when it comes time to then review and make changes to the zoning ordinance, which would have to come as a result of your new master plan.
So how many council members have you gotten feedback from?
You.
Oh, John.
Is that what you
Nice
were-
question, yeah.
That's what I asked him.
Good job, John.
Originally, I got feedback from everyone. I'm just talking about the second draft.
Okay. Anything else?
It's interesting. I mean, I appreciate asking for feedback and everything, which I know people did in the past. But there could be so many one-offs,
Oh, yeah.
in that process that, it's like it could lead you absolutely nowhere. I just wonder if that's the best path to follow. I mean, it's great, and don't get me wrong, but it could be really hard to wrap your arms around. I'm just guessing. you know, when
Yeah, I think-
they do all come.
I think the thing I've looked for in there are what are the actionable items? You know, a lot of it is, you know, those kinds of broader strategies, concepts and that kind of thing. But what are the actionable items? Those are the things I'm going through there and really trying to focus on.
Good.
We can do this, this, and this. These are actionable. And I think when we sign on to the plan, we're signing on to take action towards those.
Good, excellent.
It definitely is your anchor when it comes to future zoning decisions and why something's appropriate and why something's not compatible or incompatible, and the view of what you're trying to get at by zoning in and of itself, because the master plan is the plan. That's where the name comes from. It's the plan. This is where we want the city to go. Then we take all of our zoning and our other development decisions and gear them toward implementing that plan. So we've had one plan, which was the initial plan, in 12, 13 years. It's been very old, so it's important to update that. And then, you know, you will have to in turn then look at your other ordinances. You're going to have to look at zoning. Are you going to start talking about different types of residential zones in certain types of places? Are you going to start talking about some kind of commercial design standards that may implement your plan that you may need to in turn implement by ordinance if that's what you want to do? It becomes a much bigger. This is a big thing. A master plan for a city is a big thing. And it does guide your viewpoint in the future. I mean, when you get, most cities have a lot of rezonings. We don't have very many because of the nature of our situation. But when you have a rezoning come to you, conformity with the master plan is number one. And it's never whether, well, we like Allen's and we don't like Walmart. That's not a zoning decision. That's improper. We want retail in that area. You know, it's that kind of thing. So you don't make zoning decisions based on that particular thing. And one of those things you can base it on is your comprehensive plan, which is your number one thing. Now let me add this. We live in a privately planned community. There are limits on what you're going to be able to do in terms of a public land use plan. Simply because of the fact that you've got most of your land in this city governed by private covenants. So in terms of a normal city, I'll say normal, I don't mean to say we're abnormal, but I just mean in a traditional city, you might determine that that would be a good area for an industrial area at some point. Well, if that property is restricted to where it could never be built as industrial, and you all adopt ordinances that mandate it be built as industrial because you want to adopt a master plan and a zoning ordinance in conformity with it, because of the unique situation we are in Bella Vista, you may have zeroed the value of that property and taken it because they can't build anything on it anymore. They can't conform with the law and build industrial because it has no value as an industrial property because of private covenants. This is a thicket of law that is unique to us. And so when it comes to implementation, you can have the plans are fine. Plans are plans, so that's good. But when it comes to implementation, we're going to be very careful about how we view doing that. And we're going to be limited more than most cities would be. So I just want to make that point. Not to say there's a storm of brewing, but also want to limit the expectations of what we can do given our unique circumstances here. And of course, those parts of the cities which aren't restricted in covenants, we've got the full array of things that we can do.
As a normal city.
As a traditional city would be. But I'll say, you know, if the city of Rogers determined to zone the center of the Champions Golf Course as industrial and appropriate for rendering plants, and it could never be built there, now that would be a terrible zoning decision, but the city could do that. Then they would have zeroed the value of all that property and end up having to pay millions of dollars to property owners because they took the value of their land away from them. I've got to keep us from doing that unintentionally.
So I don't know if there's been any additional comment, because I was obviously not here in December, but, and this is maybe just some feedback. The change of leadership with Cooper, has that maybe opened up more possibilities than maybe would have otherwise had?
Yes, I believe it has. I met with Mr. Berger and others on December the 18th. We spoke for an hour and a half, and I went through everything, such as I need a hotel, we need more economic development. I need you to be a better partner and to move faster. And we just went through a whole host of different things, including looking at the land that Cooper owns north of Rocky Del Hollow, which is in the county. Be nice if they would annex that, because it's a budding Bella Vista and they can get water through the POA. And if you're going to develop it, and because the bypass is going right through it, I'd like you to annex. So we had that whole discussion. No decisions were made, and we now have to get back and talk further. We talked about the provision of water for the 2 shopping centers across from Allen's, without the burden of having to become part of the POA. And they didn't say no. So there are a lot of discussions yet that still have to happen, but I walked away from it feeling as if something is going to change and it's going to be for the better. I haven't had that in a long time.
Did you have any conversation with how we lag other cities of our same size in sales tax collection?
Absolutely.
For the city and...
Yeah, and the growth as well. You know, the chart that I send out to you every month where you can see all the listing of the new residential housing permits, and it goes all the way back to 2013. I had Doug's group actually blow it up to a 4x6, and I pinned it on the wall in their conference room and continually went back there and said, there is growth. And we're not meeting it in the expectation of amenities. And then here's Esri. And here, for example, we lose about $38 million a year, not in taxes, but in gross revenue, because Bella Vista's residents are going elsewhere to buy their meals. Now that includes anything that you might have bought on your last trip, but for the most part, it's in the neighboring cities. And we need to staunch that and keep the tax base here.
You know, the most recent sales tax file that you sent out the city by, I'm going to call it city, I don't know what else to call it, but the different breakouts, and then you have one by county as well. You know, we might be able to use that because we're like 11% of the county's population, right? And we could show what percent of tax receipts that we gather on every one of those lines and see what our percentage to the county is. It might actually help us identify some of our more obvious needs as far as where our residents are going south, you know, to spend their money. Now, we can't get McDonald County because I know some people are spending a little bit of money in McDonald County, but it's not much. Not much. No. But we might be able to use that to help identify some of our more obvious needs here. You know what I mean? If we're only getting 2% of the sales tax receipts, but we're 11% of the population, somewhere else maybe we're getting 5%. Yep. I'm just saying, I was just thinking about through that today and how we could utilize that information maybe to our benefit and to help point out our more obvious opportunities.
The problem that we run into occasionally is somebody somewhere must be inputting not only the amount, but putting in the NARCS code. And if they slip on the NARCS code, because occasionally we've seen the tax slip on some of these, and we go, well, wait a minute, I mean, it's very, very high, and you don't know what's really in there. You think it's been constant, and it dropped. But for the best of our ability, we can't figure out why. And so then we go back to F&A at the state, and they might talk to you, but they're not willing to go through all the input documents. I would have thought, frankly, that somehow the city or the code that each business must have would be automatically tied forever to the NARCS code, and it would never change. But that doesn't seem to be the case. But yes, for example, the general building one, well, there's only one, and that's T.H. Rogers. So that's fairly easy to do. But when you get into some of the other ones, it gets very difficult. But certainly we can, we go down it again. But if you wanted to say to me, can we figure out if we should have an Italian restaurant?
Well, not specific, no, but I'm just talking about the more broad.
Sure.
So anyway, I'm going to fiddle around with it.
What I'd really like to do is see the same report for Bentonville and Rogers and see where are they really strong, where are we weak, and we may be able to, find a comparison that way. But your point's well taken. Okay, a bond update. We're on track with where we should be. Mr. Bowman sent to us the actual publication that has to go in the papers. Wayne worked on it today because we actually have to also include the places of voting.
It's
When is that?
scheduled, it'll be published on February 5th.
Okay,
Because it had to be at least 10 days or more before the beginning of early voting. So,
and now that the POA assessment vote is finished, the citizens, as part of the CHIP committee, are now geared up. They've got signs, they've got pamphlets. They've been asking local merchants if they can set up desks so that they can have information booths. I've been speaking to quite a few service clubs. I did one yesterday, and I know that both chiefs have also been talking to some of the church groups, and the feeling is still very much, it's a positive. Everybody wants to see it. So I'm heartened with that. One thing I'd like to get your feedback on as part of the security that I failed to mention earlier is whether or not for the council meetings that are held here and perhaps even for the commission meetings, should we be turning on the metal detector? I went out to the mayors in the surrounding city. Some are saying no, that they think it sends the wrong message. Others are saying we're looking very seriously at it. Both counties today have you go through a metal detector whether you're going to a quorum court or not. If you're just going in to pay a tax bill or do something else, you're forced through the metal detectors. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little torn because I can make an argument either way. And I'm wondering if anybody here has thought about that. It may be something that you want to think about a little more, and we can discuss it further. It's the old adage of, well, how far do you take it? But then the other side of the picture is, what happened if something wrong, and somebody will say, well, you had a metal detector there, why the devil didn't you have it on in the first place? And so I've gone back and forth in my own mind. We don't have to have the discussion tonight, but I would very much appreciate it if you give it some thought and perhaps talk to some of your constituents. I've talked to some of them when I go out and I talk about the bond, just as a side note, and I get a mixed reaction. Some say absolutely we should have it on, others saying I'm not sure. So if you would think about that, please. If you want to pop into the office and chat about it, that's fine too. But I think it's probably the last piece of the security puzzle that we really want to look at and make a determination if we should be using it or not. It would put an additional strain on the police. Chief is always here, but it means we would have to have somebody out at the door all the time. So you're talking overtime, all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, where do you draw the line on the security? When is enough to give everybody the good feeling that that everybody is safe that attends these meetings, not just us? So if you would, please, I'd be grateful.
I guess my initial reaction is that we always have an armed officer here, whether it's Chief Graves or whether it is a uniformed patrolman. If we wanted to enhance that a little bit, we could ask the chief to assign a patrol officer to attend our meetings in addition to him as a secondary person. That would give us some additional backup in terms of internal response should there be an issue that should come up.
That's true, except most shooting incidents are finished in what, 6 seconds? 10 seconds?
Well, I recognize that the time cycle for them to occur is relatively short, yet having a suitable armed person present can counteract or at least take that person out as well.
Okay, but the problem, arises is you hope that everybody's ducking and not getting caught in a crossfire.
Yeah.
But
There's always that risk in any event, and I guess I would prefer to be caught in a crossfire as opposed to simply sitting there like sitting ducks and going after more.
well, I prefer not to be in a crossfire or
Well,
anything.
Yeah,
I
it's
do
just a
too,
stupid
but-
statement there.
But I guess the reality is.
The only thing I don't, so you can secure that door, but this building isn't that secure overall. When you really look around.
The windows are full
Somebody
exposure.
wanted to pull something, I'm just saying.
Sure.
You'd have to go a lot farther than prevent people from coming through that
Mhm.
front door in there.
You know, we've got the flower pots along the edge, which may stop a car from coming through. But if somebody wants to shoot out the windows, they can shoot out the windows.
I don't want to give any ideas, but
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
Well, I guess they use the metal detector for court, right?
Yes, they do. Now, it'll be a little bit different, you know, once we get the new court. That'll be laid out quite differently than this.
What, any closing results on the Centerton water purchase? Do we have a final bill? Have we approved the final bill? Have we paid the final bill? What's the final tally?
The final tally is $28,653.53, not the $50,414.51 that they wanted, saving us $21,760.98. We agreed initially to the $86,53.53. It was made up of smaller amounts, less than $10,000 as per the MOU. We agreed to pay them the $20,000 for the work completed because it was done before we signed the MOU. But the other charge for the $21,000, we said according to the MOU, we're not prepared to pay it, and they agreed.
And does that include our legal costs to MW?
Our legal costs?
Well, the fees that we paid to Mitchell Williams, is that a part of this total?
They were never responsible to reimburse our fees.
No, I understand that, but what was our commitment in terms of that final tally? I'd like to see an accounting of what the.
That's it. I mean, how much we expended getting up to that point in terms of legal fees, I don't have that number.
I don't
That's a
have that
separate number altogether.
That has nothing to do with the Centerton agreement.
We did have some.
That was
bills
a
with
cost
it.
of business, of looking at the business of purchase.
So that, Mayor, you want me to go ahead and kind of provide a little more information on that, or you want to leave it there in terms of?
No, I'll see Kerry tomorrow.
Okay, we'll just do that.
Okay, somebody had put on Republic Services application with Bella Vista City Ordinance.
Yes, sir. I put that on.
Okay.
We've had a number of instances where Republic Services have informed customers who were attempting to end their service that the city of Bella Vista has an ordinance that will not allow them to drop their service. And that was an inaccurate representation of our ordinance, and it's created a lot of disruption and a lot of angst for people who have moved from the area, no longer live here, and don't need trash service.
Yeah,
It's
so what,
inconsistent with our ordinance, so.
so what I've done is I've talked to Jennifer Fagan. I was hoping she would be here tonight, but she's at a bid opening. If the resident has truly moved away and is able to prove that they have taken up new residence through either a water bill, a utility bill, whatever, the key is that they are now a registered voter in another city, and that they're making an effort to sell their home here, and it's listed through Realtor or a FSBO, for sale by owner, then we've agreed that we will not pursue the billing.
Well, our ordinance says that residents of
Right.
Bella Vista are required to have trash service.
Correct.
Not property owners who have a vacant property, right? So I think there was some customer service training that needed to go on the Republic Services side.
Oh, I see
They were
what you're saying.
misrepresenting
Okay.
our ordinance and pointing people, their angst, back to the city of Bella Vista.
Okay.
And I think it was disruptive to you guys. You guys were taking calls at City Hall from angry people who said, hey, I live in Florida. Why does Republic Services tell me the city of Bella Vista won't let me drop trash service?
Yeah, we had one.
There were multiple.
I only had one come to my desk. I had two, excuse
All
me.
city councilors were emailed more recently by a second occasion
Okay.
And I am aware of others who have been told that
I've
also.
only had 2 cross my desk. And we've had
Well,
them
let
the
me,
same
let
way.
me just say this, that the city has never taken action against anyone for violating that ordinance.
That's right.
And it's a provision that requires people to have trash service if they're a resident.
Correct.
Now, how that turned into Republic saying, no, you've got to keep paying us because you still own that house,
Right.
that's never been the ordinance, and I don't know how they ended up getting on that conversation point with their clients.
Exactly.
But we've made it clear to Jennifer that this is all that the ordinance requires.
Right.
And I think they have agreed to address that. Of course, there are a lot of people that work at Republic, and whether that gets transmitted as, I can't promise you someone else may not be told something, but we have no control over what they tell their people to say to their customers.
Well, we have some control.
But we can just say what the ordinance requires and not cite people for violating it if they're not paying for trash.
But there is certainly some education that has to go on in the call center.
That's right.
And we have had in the past, just to be clear, people that live here part of the year. They may live here 6 months and live in Florida for 6 months, and they come back here. They're a resident, and they are required to maintain trash service as long as they have any residence here.
I understand
So,
that. And
that's a whole different thing where people didn't want to pay when they weren't living here at that particular moment.
And that's really between the city and the resident, not necessarily the Republic Services and the resident. If somebody wants to drop service with Republic, it seems to me they ought to be able to drop service, but.
And then the way that's supposed to work is that Republic would notify us.
Yes.
And then we would say, hey, there's someone living here, you got to have trash service, and there could be a code citation written or something. That's the way it's supposed to
Good.
work.
I'm glad it's been addressed. I'm glad they've heard us on that. I think there have been a number of cases where that's been an issue.
Okay.
And then my last comment was about the meeting venue. I think this is the first time we've had a working session in this format. I think it's worked well. I've been able to see and hear everybody. I think this is a good venue for work sessions.
Okay. We did have one suggestion that we look at other venues. A resident brought it forth to both Wayne and myself. The drawback is we now have to tape them. And when you look at some of the church halls, it would be next to impossible because of the acoustics. And we went back to the resident and explained it, and he was fine with it. He understood. I do think we will find that the AML is going to try and overturn this so that they don't have to tape anymore. A lot of cities have raised a little bit of anger about it, especially the smaller ones, because it's quite expensive. Because it's not only city council, but all your commission, A&P commission, everything has to be taped. So they all have to be in a venue where it can be done so that if someone wants to listen to it, it's not tin and there's echoes all over the place. But I guess stand by for more, but certainly Mark has told me that there are a lot of cities that would like to see a change. Okay, gone through quite a bit tonight. Thank you for your input. And please do look at the document that Glenda will send out and get your comments on the comprehensive plan that we got, please. Safe home and safe tomorrow morning. It looks as though it could be a week. We'll see what happens. Good night.
Good night.